This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Tech Now, right here on your Beyond the News station, Radio Now 95.3 FM. My name is Stephen Imediegu and I am with
Nabila Osman.
Together we're going to take you through the world of tech, looking at the latest stories on the technological front, as well as bringing you a conversation on what to expect as far as tech policies are concerned in the brand new year 2024. We start off with Ericsson, where the Swedish Telecoms equipment maker has announced its appointment of Lars Sandstrom as its new Chief Financial Officer. Sandstrom replaces longtime company veteran Carl Melander. Mr. Sandstrom will join the company on the 1st of April and will be based in Sweden, according to a statement from Ericsson. Sandstrom is currently the CFO and a member of the executive team at Getinge, where he has been working since 2017. Now, last year, Ericsson had announced that Melander planned to step down at the end of the first quarter of this year.
And also in tech news, on Wall Street in the United States of America, law enforcement agencies are investigating a breach in security protocols at the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. The SEC was the victim of, quote, SIM swapping, a technique internet fraudsters used to seize control of telephone lines when its account on the social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter, was hacked earlier this month. The US SEC also said that 6 months prior to the attack, staff had removed an added layer of protection known as multi-factor authentication and did not restore it until after the January 9th attack. An unidentified person or persons gained access to the account and posted the false announcement that approval had already been granted for the exchange-traded products tracking Bitcoin. This announcement caused a momentary jump in the cryptocurrency's price. In a split vote, the commission granted approval the following day. Law enforcement agencies in the US are working to learn how the hackers prevailed on the SEC's mobile carrier to make the switch.
Now, moving from that bit of news, we go to US tech giant Apple, who have paid a Russian fine of 1.2 billion rubles, that's about $13.65 million, imposed over the company's alleged abuse of its dominant market position concerning in-app payments. This is according to Russia's FAS antitrust agency. Now, Apple had previously disagreed with the FAS ruling that Apple's distribution of its apps through its own iOS operating software gave it its own products a competitive advantage, but the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service said that Apple had paid the fine on the 19th of January and that the funds had been transferred to Russia's federal budget. This is not the first time that Apple has gotten into hot water. In February of last year, the FAS said that Apple had paid a $12.1 million fine in another antitrust case that alleged Apple's abuse of its dominance in the mobile apps market. Russia has been at loggerheads with foreign technology companies for many years, particularly over what Moscow deemed unlawful content and a failure to store user data locally, in simmering disputes that have intensified after Russia dispatched troops to Ukraine in February of 2022.
And still in tech news, the trend of layoffs in the video game industry in 2024 is continuing, with League of Legends maker Riot Games as the latest example. Yesterday night, the company announced that, quote, we are refocusing on fewer high-impact projects to move us toward a more sustainable future, which means eliminating roles for 530 people globally, or about 11% of its total workforce. This news arrives just days after the results of a Game Developers Conference survey showed 56% of respondents felt layoffs were in store for their studios due in large part to a post-pandemic course correction. CEO Dylan Jadeja said in a company-wide message, quote, some of the significant investments we've made aren't paying off the way we expected them to. He pointed to Riot's 10th anniversary expansions in 2019 that spread the League of Legends universe across new games and other forms of entertainment. What Riot says it's prioritizing is the core live games it makes, like League of Legends, Valorant, Teamfight Tactics, and Wild Rift, as well as esports and events tied to those titles. Similarly, the still in development project L2D fighting game with lead characters is said to be making great progress, and season 2 of its Arcane TV show for Netflix is on track to come out in November.
And from these tech stories, we now turn to a conversation that we have promised. We're going to be speaking this morning on tech policies, particularly in the year 2024, as Nigeria starts to make waves in the world of technology and starts to build on some of its more positive steps from the previous year. We're going to be joined by a member of Tech Cabal in just a moment for this conversation. Do stay with us.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
And this morning on Tech Now, we've rather examined the policy victories that were recorded in the tech ecosystem in 2023 and forecast this year's milestones and expectations. Our guest is Ganiyu Oloruntade, a journalist with Tech Cabal, and he's been at the center of conversations speculating new frontiers in the tech space. Mr. Oloruntade, good morning and thank you for joining us on the conversation.
Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning.
Thanks for having me.
Right. To jump into it, one of the highlights that has been talked about in tech conversations has been the appointment of a tech-savvy person to the Federal Executive Council. How do you see this playing out in Nigeria in 2024?
I think it's a major win, considering the fact that for the very first time, the ecosystem now has a seat at the table, and having someone, represent the interests of the ecosystem, in the federal cabinet is a major win. And if you also look at the profile of the person in question, how hard he has worked, for the growth of this ecosystem, how he has been, integral to, to the development of this ecosystem that we enjoy today. So it's a major win, and I think that many people are quite bullish on what the minister would do. And, and we've seen, manifestations of that, right? Last year, the 3 million hectare talent project was, unveiled, and, and that's been ongoing since then. And there've been like a lot of conversations around implementation of the Startup Act. They've been quite a number of moves on the part of the minister that shows signs that, indeed we have our own person, at the table, and we're quite optimistic that it would, translate to something good for us in the long run.
So, Mr. Oloruntade, I want to shift from the person to the policies, right? From last year, even early last year, you mentioned just now the startup bill, which has been signed into law. So we're talking about the Startup Act, right? And then this minister also launched the 3 million technical talent, the 3 MTT program. There's also the Startup Support and Engagement Portal, which you have also noted in your work. Just looking at these policies that were instituted last year, what does it mean for 2024?
Like you rightly pointed out, it's the Startup Act effort has now been made, towards implementation of the Startup Act. And I think that considering how the Startup Act itself came to be, because it's a product of collaboration of both, government players and as well as the ecosystem. Many people are quite bullish on what the Startup Act will translate to, and I feel like the decision of the minister to set up the Startup Engagement Portal, it's a right step in the right direction, and because we look at what that portal will translate to in terms of the major offerings, labeling of startups, registration of VCs, angel investors, accelerators, incubators, and all of that. Also need to talk about tax incentive, access to financial resources. So it's a step, to a larger benefit for the ecosystem, because this is just one part of it. There's still much more. The way the Startup Act has been designed, it's designed to work in stages. So once you cross one phase, you move to another phase, and it goes on and on. Like, the conversation around domestication of the Startup Act, for instance, has been on since like last year, and we hope to see what that translates to this year.
Mr. Oloruntade, one other conversation that you've had, especially in, I believe, the first couple of days of this year, was around the listing of tech startups on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. I would like to draw your attention to that and ask if there has been any move. Now, I know that some tech journalists in the space have said it's a little too soon for us to have tech startups on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, but what exactly is the outlook of the stock exchange itself, especially in the conversations that you've had with them?
Based on the conversation I had with the acting CEO of the NGX, we expect to see one or two listings of tech startups on the NGX this year. And if you recall vividly, the NGX Tech Board was set up in December 2022, and that's like a very long time ago. And they've been like a lot of conversations around how this will play out. Because if you think about it, going public is like the hallmark of a mature company. And if you look at the ecosystem as it is, we don't have so many startups that are mature enough to list on the NGX. And there's always been like some other argument around the fact that the startup raised from foreign VCs, and some of these investors will not want them to go public on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, considering the volatility of the naira. And there's also a question of liquidity on the NGX too. I mean, the NGX has been on quite an impressive run, in the past couple of months. We've seen very, very crazy numbers. We've seen, companies there, securing lots of wins, which is good. But we also have to understand that, startups are different from traditional companies, right? And, it could really, really be tricky. But the truth is, they've been on effort, and if I'm going to bank on what I know, there've been effort by some startups to actually list, though we can't exactly verify which startup in question. But again, like I said, the CEO of the NGX told me that we expect to see one or two listings this year, and I'm pretty sure that would be like the beginning of more startups actually getting to list on NGX. So if we see one or two listings this year as promised, we would expect that by next year we'll see more startups, more mature startups, considering the options of listing on NGX. Because if you look at it, the currency devaluation situation is like one very key issue, and people have been looking for alternatives really that should start considering raising in local currency. So imagine raising in naira and you get to list on the NGX also in naira. It saves you the trouble of converting to dollars and all of those things that usually happen. So a lot is still expected to happen. So early days we can't exactly predict much.
So just looking a little more into what could be the latest, I wonder if you see the minister sort of consolidating on certain things that have been kick-started, or are we going to start to explore newer frontiers? Just last week he was at Davos in Switzerland and he granted a few interviews. In one of them where he was speaking to CNBC, which is a US-based media house, he talked about Africa as a continent, not just Nigeria. With the nature of tech, the borderlessness of it all, do you think that we're in a place to start collaborations with other African countries?
I think collaboration is critical and a no-brainer, and it's very important that we begin to have these conversations on a continental level and not necessarily make it a Nigerian-focused thing. And the reasons are not far-fetched. The African tech ecosystem as a whole is quite interconnected, right? And Nigeria being the leader, no doubt, has like a very huge responsibility to drive other countries along with it. And and if you also look at it even from a policy point of view, it's critical that African leaders, African regulators begin to meet and draw policies that would affect positively in this case the growth of the ecosystem, growth of startups, create opportunities for entrepreneurs, create opportunities for investors and all of that. Because I recall that I was in Nigeria last December and at the African Startup Conference organized by the Nigerian Ministry of Startups, and there was a particular conference. There was like a panel that featured ministers of tech from different African countries, and part of the resolution from that conversation was you know, a startup visa. So these leaders are looking at creating the startup visa that will allow, you know, free entry and free exit of, you know, startup founders, VCs across the continent. So that's like the level of collaboration that I think should exist on the policy making side. So it's critical that, you know, Nigeria as the leader of the African tech ecosystem, you know, recognize its position. And we see reasons why, because the truth is cannot exist in isolation, right? We even on the startup level, we see startups from Nigeria, you know, acquiring startups, you know, in other African countries, startups from Nigeria acquiring regulatory, you know, license and all of that in some other markets. So expansion happens across board. So we look at how interconnected the African market is. I think it's critical that collaboration is key when it comes to policy making.
Right. There's also this angle this year of the CBN lifting its ban on cryptocurrency transactions. Has there been a shift or in the volume or the interest of Nigerians in cryptocurrency?
So I would say that the interest of Nigerians is not exactly connected to the regulatory landscape. If you look at the numbers, Nigerians have been quite interested in cryptocurrency, you know, and even before, you know, we had the CBN ban of crypto transactions, they've been like a huge interest. And even despite the ban, really, lots of Nigerians are still bullish on crypto. So, so decision of the CBN to, you know, to reverse back its ban, it's a good move. I think it, you know, offers some level of confidence, particularly for crypto startups that are focused on the market. So, and we expect to see that more of the startups that already offer, you know, those crypto-enabled solutions and services, you know, can approach the regulators now, you know, to secure necessary licenses. There've been conversations around some startup approaching the CBN to get this license and all of that. So there's that part of it. But so one very important thing we also need to understand is regulation plays a key role in how people perceive, you know, an ecosystem. So the more we make the regulatory landscape convenient, you know, the more we make it more palatable for startups, the more we see more interest. So I think for crypto, Nigerians are still bullish on crypto, and I'm glad that the CBN is saying things in the right direction.
Mr. Oloruntade, thank you very much for speaking with us this morning. That's our conversation with Ganiu Oloruntade, a tech journalist, speaking on the policies that will affect 2023 as far as the tech ecosystem is concerned, and answering some of the questions around forecasts regarding the listing of tech startups on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. That's all for our conversation today on Tech Now. Join us on the next edition next week right here on your Beyond the News station, Radio Now 95.3 FM. The rest of Now Breakfast continues in just a moment.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM.